Welcome to Reclaiming Democracy in Serbia, a strategic guide for citizens, activists, and allies. For the last decade, culminating in 2025, Serbia had faced authoritarianism. Um, but together, we can restore all freedoms, institutions, and the rule of law. And this manual outlines a non-violent path to change rooted in human rights and European values. So let's begin the journey on how to reclaim Serbia's future. Uh, my name is Boško Nektarjević from the European Training Network, or EU Funds News. My academic background is BBA at IFAN Business School in Paris, France, 1999, MBA at Solvay Business School at Brussels University in 2004, and executive education at Harvard Kennedy School of Governance in Boston in 2006. I co-founded and managed a Brussels-based lobbying company, Access, and I had high-level management position in several companies, including Balkan Security Network and quite a few others. And I've spent last 20 plus years writing, evaluating, and managing EU projects mostly, and building capacity of participants across the EU, Med countries, Arab countries, and beyond. I'm not creating this guide to bore you with donors' language and guidelines. So today's all about practical insights from ETN experience or successful cases. I'd like to share my experience that got my clients funded and successful in leading disruptive innovations, whether in the industry or societal disruptive innovations. So my goal is simple: to help you understand how international frameworks of power work and how you can find funding that fits your project organization and your ambition. Now, this slide explains how vast majority of funding program work. So the politicians on a country level, like USA, Germany, or EU level, debate about joint objectives they want to achieve, and then develop policies and strategies. So long-term priorities are set by politicians and institutional frameworks. Now, politicians usually work for the 1%, the financial elite, those who fund their campaigns, and not for the interests of their countries and people. And then executive agencies, organizations designed to implement and they work to design instruments to achieve those objectives. At the EU level, in a simplified manner, that would be European Commission with its agencies, growing number of agencies, and then they create instruments like regulations or funding programs for the long-term periods. An example for 7 years, which would be EU funding cycle. And then, of course, at a lower level, EU instruments, funding programs are instruments, and regulations are instruments for the long term. But then we develop work programs, and in work programs we set priorities for the next 1 or 2 years. And finally, the applicants shape the impact. So I wanted to start traditionally presentation with this slide, explaining how EU or USA or Germany, France, UK, or any other framework of power, it might be China, Russia, or so on, and their intelligence and security services work to influence countries or completely capture them, like Serbia or Ukraine. so installing puppet regimes. Now, I published in 2025, February, early 25, sort of a strategic warning text that despite the appearance of political crisis, which is not losing control, he was executing a calculating containment strategy, and his regime and Serbian security services deployed a full spectrum response to neutralize threats before they escalate. And they included narrative control, of course, acknowledging anger, but frame it as bureaucratic inefficiency or foreign interference, which was very common today, broadly spread, as if it's a color revolution or Russia or some Western powers are behind it and so on. Like it's not corruption that's at the heart of the problem. The scapegoating, sacrificing mid-level figures. We saw a few minor sacrifices, but keeping the core power network intact, and then fake reformism, announcing superficial changes like working groups and stuff like that, uh, designed to stall and not fix problems and institutions. Then trying and successfully, of course, succeeding in opposition fragmentation, uh, attacking student leaders, creating internal divisions between populist terminology like nationalists and those who are pro-EU and those who are pro-Russia, and similar, all sorts of divisions they could imagine. They're currently sprouting these rumors and creating conflicts. And then, of course, having complete media monopoly, and this is nothing new. It happened for the last decade. EU and US and all institutions are well aware of it. Tightening control over all media, including online content, which is now we in Serbia don't have even the independent online channels because of cooperation of big tech giants and the government. Then network infiltration, trying to get in the student movement, in the opposition parties, and so on and so on. Illusions of renewal, pointing to new faces and insignificant puppets, which would be loyal to the core center, exactly presenting cosmetic changes, while the criminal core remains untouched. Then election manipulations, which we've been fairly familiar with for the last more than a decade. Then, of course, populist distractions, uh, um, like nationalist rhetoric, for example, to try to secure rural and loyalist support, and uh, keeping security apparatus well paid, protected, unchanged, above the law, of course, and based on loyal services to the core party elite. Then foreign shielding. We also saw that regime was strengthening ties with foreign backers like EU, US, well, typically investors in lithium, for example, or Expo, or other, um, I would call them not highly profitable deals, but robbery deals when trying to cover up the robbery, which would, of course, benefit the stability of the puppet regime. So it was a strategic warning, essentially, and that if the opposition doesn't act wisely, that the regime would sort of contain and more could also kill the crisis before it becomes existential to them. However, it did become existential, but now what we're witnessing is again similar to Ukraine, a war of nutrition, I say. Uh, and we can see very well organized, highly well organized and planned and implemented uh, counterintelligence operation, which it certainly wasn't led by solely Serbian security services. It was heavily supported with by Israel and U.S. and EU. Now, in 2025, we are actually at a crossroads. The authoritarian regime, Vučić and SNS elite, has eroded all freedoms, destroyed or captured all state institutions, of course, including the media, and especially the misuse of judiciary and control and misuse of armed forces. So our goal is to reclaim democratic institutions through nonviolent struggle, hopefully. So this manual, this presentation is for citizens and for activists and allies worldwide, offering a roadmap to restore the rule of law ethically and effectively. To dismantle authoritarianism, we must understand that the regime centers Vučić, the SNS, and loyal security services, cronies, and informal networks maintain control, while propaganda and captured media silence dissent. Of course, electoral engineering is at the core of this fake legality and legal facade to mask repression. So knowing the structure is the first step to breaking it. And every regime has weaknesses. So this uh, illusion of a state, Serbia currently has no institutions. None of the institutions functioning, and Serbia's structures maintaining this illusion that it is a state are no exception. They do have weaknesses. So, of course, corruption is a major one, sparks public anger, while, of course, violence, institutional violence, even more. Then elite structures create cracks, and regime overreach sort of alienated students and farmers, of course, and more wider, different groups of stakeholders. And its reliance on US and EU legitimacy and vulnerability to grassroots and diaspora pressure gives some leverage to act strategically. So resistance, non-violence resistance, is our greatest weapon. Drawing from ETN success cases, we prioritize the moral high ground to win trust, broad coalition, unite students, workers, hopefully clergy, part of it, and different stakeholders, while decentralized leadership ensures resilience. So non-violence isn't just ethical, it's effective, maximizing our impact safely. United movement needs diverse allies, engaging students, journalists, NGOs, farmers, clergy, diaspora, and so on and so on. And reaching out to major international allies like the EU, UN, embassies, and so on and so on, building trust with the global media to amplify the cause, and together it forms a power front for democracy. The regime uses surveillance mostly and sabotage to stop the movement. But we can say ahead, using secure tools for communication. Now, example would be Signal, but there are other even better. And organize anonymously in decentralized cells. Might be 3 to 6 people not knowing about each other's plan, coordinated at a high level, and counter disinformation with verified facts and train activists in digital security and counterintelligence. So being prepared for infiltrations and protecting the movement and keeping it strong. Now, disruptive non-cooperation, disruptive actions can paralyze the regime, like general strikes, university shutdowns, bureaucratic paralysis. They hit hard as well. Uh, Transport paralysis, particularly for the strategically most important projects used to secure foreign support, like lithium mining, like Expo, and so on and so on. Mass tax boycotts, cutting the financial the backing, financial non-compliance in general to weaken the resources. These type of non-violent actions disrupt the system's operations and showing the power of collective resistance. And creativity is a weapon against authoritarianism. So using humor and satire to ridicule and expose and disrupt and destroy the regime's flaws. So that's essentially jamming the fake main media narrative and capturing attention while creating parallel institutions, build legitimacy. So bold public actions amplified on social media, they inspire others to join the cause. And the legitimate media and narrative control wars are very important. So regime controlled narratives through propaganda, and it's heavily funded. It's also flooding the social networks and online media. However, we can fight back, launching independent media platforms, independent websites, independent profiles on social media networks, and again, independent groups when they protected communication channels that engage also international outlets, ideally, to present and show how the repression works, to exactly document criminal regime activities, violence, arrests, beatings, and all other sorts of repression that they're using. Now they've spiraled to killing and so on. So creating this content and documenting abuses, of course, even with video evidences, is very powerful. And controlling the other side, countering the narrative with truth, we actually expose their lies and expose their game and inspire action. So that's the essence of how this truthful narrative about fighting the repression is winning. So elections, of course, are the major battleground to win over democracy. So mobilizing independent observers is critical to monitor voting, to build parallel voter registers to ensure accuracy to expose fraud publicly and prepare for post-election wars about the results and prepare for mobilization and leveraging elections. We can certainly weaken regimes' uh, legitimacy. They certainly do not have any trace of legitimacy anymore. However, what we can see is the economic interests of the 1% and the puppet servants installed within EU, US, and other regimes are cooperative and complicit in these high-level corruption deals, such as lithium mining, such as Expo, and so on. Exposing them publicly is essentially destroying and disrupting their legitimacy. So that's strengthening our cause. When the regime cracks, again, what we experienced in 2000 when we had broken the Milosevic criminal apparatus, we must be ready not to spiral into similar mistakes. So recognizing collapse signals at first and to manage security services, defections, and these fractioning is highly important, especially to prevent those who had been leading at the forefront of security and intelligence services, the repression and criminal activities, to prevent the violence is one priority, and the other to prevent them from orchestrating the new facade under which they are keep thriving, and to ensure the peaceful transition of their power to a different platform of power, establishing interim governance to pursue some sort of reconciliation, but also it's important to pursue justice and to lay the foundation for a democratic platform. And a democratic Serbia requires a long-term renewal plan to rebuild trust in institutions and to rebuild institutions as they don't exist anymore, and to straighten the civil society as the watchdog and control mechanism, to implement lustration, vetting to ensure accountability, to pursue constitutional reform, again, critical to secure democracy, and by anchoring Serbia, hopefully in EU integration, we build a sustainable future. And when I say EU integration, it's important to state that current EU regimes, what we can see in most of the countries, are not essentially serving their nations and people. Most of them are actually serving US interests and 1%, as I previously stated. However, the principles prior to what we had witnessed in 2005 on EU level, the principles of enlargement are a healthy base in terms of values and in terms of institutional framework that this transformation, that the long-term renewal of Serbia requires. So it's best guideline for integration in the world around us that we have. We have seen that the student movement reached for support to the EU, also to EUS, And we had seen also that leaders of the movement had been brutally targeted in the media and also um, personally in their homes, the streets, and during protests, peaceful protests, they've been beaten, arrested, um, and we had seen also victims in terms of human lives. So the time to act is now, to join the non-violent movement for Serbia's democracy. And if you'd like to help, then share this manual with allies and networks. Again, use secure tools to organize safely. Stay united, resilient, and hopeful. Together we can dismantle authoritarian and criminal regime, puppet regime, and reclaim Serbia's democratic future. And we had demonstrated that already on several occasions. In June, in July, prior to that, in March, and again every day in the last several months uh, in pretty much all Serbian cities. So there's no better evidence than this paralysis of transport institutions, which is currently happening. So thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me using my email.